Okay, our crash course in basic brain anatomy. First, the human brain can be divided into two major areas. The lower brain, consisting of the green and yellow areas in this picture, and the higher brain, called the forebrain, and represented by the orange part of this picture. You can think of these as like the continents on a globe. The lower brain consists of the brain stem and the cerebellum, and they are involved in lower functions, those related to survival like breathing, sleeping, feeding, mating, movement, etc. The brain stem is sometimes called the reptilian brain because it was the first to evolve and is still the entire brain in reptiles. As humans continued to evolve, layers were built over the lower brain, and this upper brain is called the forebrain. The forebrain is involved in complex thought and higher functions that differentiate humans from other species, in some cases for its existence, but mostly for its complexity, the complexity of its wiring. Each of these two major areas are divided into structures that you might think of as countries. It is easiest to see them if we cut the brain in half and view it from the center. So here we go. Let's begin with the lower brain. The whole green part here is the brain stem. Now watch my cursor. The lower part of the brain stem, up to this bulge, is called the medulla. The bulging part is called the pons. Notice that once a brain is cut in half, you can see that the brainstem goes right up into the middle of the forebrain. This is why this little top part of the brainstem is called the midbrain, though it is still part of the brainstem. Now, not labeled here, but important, is the reticular formation, a set of interconnected nuclei, and its fibers run all the way up the brainstem. Watch my cursor. All the way up the center of the brainstem, through the medulla, the pons, and the midbrain, and into the thalamus. Although the reticular formation is housed in the brainstem, it has fibers that reach all the way up through the thalamus and into different parts of the cerebral cortex. See this? Going into all different parts of the cerebral cortex. This is important because it means the reticular formation exerts some control over what sensory information reaches the cortex for higher level interpretation. For instance, when you are awake, you hear others talking quietly around you, but when you are asleep, you usually don't. So the reticular formation plays an important role in sleep and consciousness in this way. In fact, damage to the reticular formation that leaves the sensory system pathways intact but not functioning can result in a permanent coma state. The yellow mass just behind the brainstem here is the cerebellum, meaning the little brain, cerebellum. Scientists are just beginning to learn more about the role of the cerebellum in sleep and wake. Its main waking role is a coordination and fine-tuning of movement, but it is also involved in both non-REM and REM sleep. Sleep disorders are reported in people with cerebral diseases. Next, we have the thalamus sitting right on top of the brainstem in blue here. Okay. This is an important location because the thalamus functions as the gatekeeper, a gate through which sensory information coming up through the reticular formation must pass through in order to be interpreted and processed by the cerebral cortex. There is a special area at the front part of the thalamus called the hypothalamus, right here, hypothalamus. It is especially important because it houses the circadian rhythm master clock. I've also thrown in the pineal gland here. Because it is important for the sleep and wake cycles. It exists between the left and right hemispheres of the thalamus, back about here where my cursor is. Notice how the hypothalamus is between the eyes and the pineal gland. So the hypothalamus right there. Okay? This is convenient because the master clock in the hypothalamus gets messages from the retinas responding to light and dark outside and sends these messages to the pineal gland. Now let's add in the higher brain. The cerebral cortex is the entire pink area up here and is divided into a left and right hemisphere. Because this is an image of the brain cut in half, we are only seeing one hemisphere. The right and left hemispheres are connected by fibers called the corpus callosum, represented here in gray. See this gray area here? Sometimes people with epilepsy have life-threatening seizures during which neural spreading activation literally goes wild. And as a last resort, opt for split brain surgery. In this surgery, the corpus callosum fibers are cut, and this communication between the two hemispheres is ended. While this brings on a whole new set of problems, at least they are not life-threatening. And future seizures that begin in one hemisphere of the brain can no longer spread to the other. There are 2 copies of this figure posted in this week's to-do list under this lecture. One with labels and one without, so you can study these before your next test. We recommend printing both copies, testing yourself using the one without the labels, with immediate feedback from the one with the labels, until you can quickly and easily identify each structure. Don't study until you get them all right. Study until you can't possibly get them wrong. Finally, before we move on to lobes of the brain, let me point out one more important area to you, the basal forebrain indicated in this image in red. The basal forebrain is involved in both wake and sleep due to its release of acetylcholine during wake and REM sleep. Furthermore, it induces slow-wave sleep by using adenosine to inhibit the release of acetylcholine. In our next segment, we'll look at lobes of the brain.